Good morning. Today on Spotlight, two important Michigan history, education, and community projects. The centennial of Dr. Ossian Sweet's family moving into their landmark home in Detroit, and Grand Rapids' multi-million-dollar Ford 50 Civic campaign. My guest, Daniel A. Baxter, founder and CEO of the Dr. Ossian Sweet Foundation, and Gleaves Whitney, executive director of the Ford Presidential Foundation. It's Sunday, August the 31st. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. Dr. Ossian Sweet Foundation. You've got a big centennial coming up. What is it, and what's the significance to today's society?
So on September 7th, 8th, and 9th, we're having our 7th annual open house, which commemorates 100 years that the mob stood at the front door of Dr. Ossian Sweet's house. So we're recognizing and commemorating that moment for those particular 3 days to make sure that people understand our history, to guarantee that we never repeat it.
And in a nutshell, for if someone just tuned in and doesn't have a clue who Dr. Sweet was, tell us the quick backstory. What happened 100 years ago?
So on September 8th, 1925, Dr. Sweet, his wife Gladys, brothers Otis Henry, his cousin John Ladden, and 6 friends moved into the modest bungalow on the corner of Garland and Charlevoix. It's in an all-white neighborhood.
And he was African American.
And he was African American. So not much happened on that day, but on September 9th, all hell breaks loose at around 8 o'clock. A mob of 500 white folks surround his house with one intent, and that's to force him out. To their chagrin, shots ring out, and a man was murdered. The Sweets were arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The national branch of the NAACP intercedes, hires famed attorney Clarence Darrell. Darrell comes to Detroit and stands before Judge Frank Murphy and affirms a man's home is his castle, whether he's white or black.
And that's where that term originated.
Yeah. And shortly thereafter, after 2 subsequent trials, the Sweets are acquitted.
People may have already seen the park that is now attached to where the home is, right in that area. What are you doing today to be able to make sure that people don't forget what happened 100 years ago? And why is it so important? Because we're living in a time now where people say, forget about the history, it's about today.
Well, you know, the old adage is if you don't know your history, you're destined to repeat it. And 1925 was not such a glamorous time for African Americans. We were struggling. We were about 60 years out of slavery, and African Americans were attempting to create a new identity. And at that particular time, they were able to do that as a result of men and women who decided to transform their presence socially, politically, and economically. So when it comes to this story, it's so important to share it so that we understand the strides that we had to take in order to get to the point where we are today. And if we ever forget that, if we ever forget the fact that it's important for us to vote, if we ever forget the fact that so many people died and struggled and suffered for the opportunity and freedoms that we have. And I'm not just talking about black people, I'm talking about all of America.
All Americans, yeah.
You know, all of our history is inextricably connected to the past. Our future is inextricably connected to the past, and it's so important that we remember it. And as we remember it, we become sensitive and we appreciate the times that we're in now.
Certainly, very well said. You have on your website, if people go to the Dr. Ossian Sweet Foundation website, you have a quote from Marcus Garvey, and it says, "A people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." It's so very true.
Yes.
That you learn from the past.
That's right. Because of those stories, the stories of Dr. Sweet, Frederick Douglass, Fannie Lou Hamer, and all of those people, it empowers me, and it also compels me to look at my life and ask the question, am I doing enough?
Before we go to the break, give folks a little tease of what's going to happen in just a couple weeks when you do this commemoration, because you got some pretty big names coming in.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. It's a 3-day celebration on Sunday, September the 7th. Dwelle and Local Act Charity will be performing, and the president and CEO of the NAACP, Derek Johnson, will be in
The
town.
national
Yes,
president, right?
national president of the NAACP will be here to receive the prestigious Dr. Ossian Sweet Legacy Award for all of his work and contributions that he's made at the NAACP and in life. And he's a native Detroiter.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
we should remind people that although he heads up the national NAACP and he doesn't live here now, that he was a born and raised Detroiter.
That's right.
So he hasn't forgotten his roots. And of course, if Dr. Wendell Anthony were here, he would say he's coming home to the biggest and baddest branch of the NAACP
That's right.
in the
That's
nation.
right. That's right.
All right, we're going to get to a break. When we come back, we want to talk about what you've done in terms of restoration for the area and what you see as the future and how this relates to education. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Your role, your day-to-day job, how has that kind of prepared you for this other mission? Because you're dealing with a sensitive issue, and that is people's right to vote and how important that is, and how that's interwoven into history as well. And it seems like this is almost like this role sort of prepared you for this other role.
Yeah, yeah. You know, when I was a little boy, my mother and father, when they went to the polls to vote, they would always take my brother and I with them and give us an opportunity to vote. If the ballot required to vote for judges and it said vote for not more than 9, they would give us an opportunity to vote for one of those candidates. And lo and behold, in 1985, I got a job with the City of Detroit Department of Elections and was able to grow and aspire to one of the highest positions within the department. And with those positions, I was able to forge relationships with various individuals, whether it was Mayor Mike Duggan, whether it was with Wayne County Executive Warren Evans. Those relationships were the relationships that I was able to use in order to grow and develop this foundation and the legacy of Dr. Sweet. I mean, when you look at 2018, when we received the $500,000 grant from the National Park Services, it was because of a relationship with the mayor and his passion about the story that occurred on the corner of Garland and Charlevoix. And the same thing with Warren Evans. Warren Evans, his uncle was a physician at Dunbar Hospital along with Dr. Sweet. So is Albert Clegg Sr.
And the people that you named are trained attorneys who understand the law and the history. And these are people that they studied trying to get through law school to understand law itself and the Constitution and those things. All right, I've buried the lead here because you have a significant tie to this home. It goes back to your childhood. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so in 1975, a gentleman from the Detroit Free Press came to our house to interview my dad. My dad declined and he sent me. And lo and behold, the man asked me, he said, "Young man, do you know the history of the house that you live in?" And I told him, yes, a black guy used to live here. He killed a white guy and he didn't go to jail for it. That moment was a magic moment, a divine moment, because it set the stage for everything that I'm doing right now. As a result of learning the true story in terms of what Dr. Sweet did, I became passionate about it. Even at 10 years old, I would tell that story to my classmates in school, at church, at different gatherings. I was just at Fisk University doing a presentation on Dr. Sweet and the impact of the Great Migration to urban cities. So that moment and living in that house really was a transformational moment, not just for me, but for the southeast side of the city of Detroit, Michigan, and America.
Daniel, and of course, for those who don't know, Fisk University, one of our famed HBCUs in Nashville, Tennessee. You were 10 years old.
Yes.
At what point did you realize you were living in this historic home? Did your parents share that with you, or was it somebody else? And did they know when they bought the house?
So My dad used to come over to Dr. Sweet's house in the 30s and 40s and do odd jobs for him. He used to mow the lawn, rake the grass, wash windows, as well as do other work with him. So he was very familiar with Dr. Sweet, and he would visit on a regular basis. My mother didn't know when they purchased it in 1958. All she knew was that it was a house that she had dreamed about, and she told my father, and they bought it. They bought it on land contract for $15,000. Dr. Sweet paid $18,500 for the home. Wow. And as a result, you know, we lived a great life. The 70s and the 80s and the 90s were a great time on the corner of Garland and Charlevoix. So my sensitivity to that house was instituted when I was 10 years old. When I learned, when I went to school one day, my teacher announced to everybody there was a celebrity in the classroom, and
and you were looking around, who's that?
We were looking around, who is the celebrity?
Right.
And she opens up the newspaper, and there's an article that says not much has changed since the 25 trials, and in the center of that article was the photo that the man from the Free Press took of me just the previous day. And my teacher, Miss Barnes, read that story, and as a result, I went home, told my mother what happened. She went into the pantry and brought out a banker's bag full of treasures of articles that told the story of Dr. Sweet. And that was the day that I learned that story. And I told my mother at that time, after I read those articles, that I was going to do something one day to make sure that people knew what Dr. Sweet did on September 8th and 9th of 1925.
Final question, what's the long-term goal? Because you've started rehabbing other homes in that area and transforming that community. What do you see as the long-range goal of this and how it relates to education?
Well, it's rooted in a story that my mother told me. She said she had an insurance man, Mr. Benson. Mr. Benson told her, Inez, whatever you do, don't ever sell your house, because when the city begins to redevelop, they're going to start right here on the southeast side of the city. And that's what's happening. And what my goal is to make sure that the nucleus of that transformation is the Dr. Ossian Sweet House. We want to work with the city, the state, and the federal government to transform that community based upon its roots, based upon its history, to ensure that the people who live there have access to all of the opportunities afforded to anybody else.
It's a museum.
And yeah, to make sure that that house is a museum and that people will be able to knock on that door and come in and stand in the same space and place that Dr. Sweet stood on September 8th and 9th to really feel the weight and gravity of that moment, so that we appreciate it, that we grow from it, and that we transform our community into a better place and a better world to live in.
Daniel Baxter, kudos to you for making sure that this is a historic home on the National Registry of Historic Homes and has all the historic designations that important things in our history have done. Would you stay in touch with us on this?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for coming in, and best of luck at the September event.
Thank you for having me.
And when we come back, we'll zoom over to Grand Rapids to talk to Gleaves Whitney about another important history and civics project to our nation. In a nutshell, what is the Ford 50 and how does that relate to that press conference that you had in front of the famed Gerald R. Ford Presidential Museum that sits right off the banks of the river there in Grand Rapids?
You know your Grand Rapids geography, that's for sure.
I've been there a few times.
Yeah, it's really, the Ford 50 is to commemorate the 50th anniversary. It's really actually rolling anniversaries of the Ford presidency. At 895 eventful days back in from 1974 to 1977, when Gerald Ford was our country's 38th president. So 50 years later, here we are, and we are celebrating all of President Ford's accomplishments, but even more than that, we're celebrating his character and the way he did politics. Because what we hear again and again, people coming in and to our museum and to our spaces, and they say, where is a Gerald Ford today? So we are raising up the values of President and Mrs. Ford, and have launched a campaign called the Ford 50, in which the goal is to raise $12 million. And in our press conference, what we were able to announce is that in the quiet phase of the campaign, we have already raised $10 million of the $12 million.
You had some big wigs behind you. You certainly had two members of the Ford family, two of his sons there. You also had former Governor John Engler, and of course you had Doug DeVos and Hank Meyer, all household names over there in Grand Rapids. You said something when you were speaking at that press conference. You said, it's time for a civic reset that transcends red and blue America. And you also talked about and kept using the phrase, we the people dare not forget. How does this tie into this civic campaign that you're doing, and what's the overall goal for it?
Well, the overall goal is to reach and teach more people than ever before using the Ford's 5 platforms. We've got the library, the museum, our foundation, the DeVos Learning Center for K through 12, and the Ford Leadership Forum for college students and young professionals, and especially young, let's call them politicians in the making, Hill staffers in Washington, D.C., and then in Lansing under the dome, people in state government. And the purpose of this is to recharge our civic purpose and not be so cynical, but be much more aware of when America has worked best in the past. America's always worked best when you have partisans. You've always had partisans in American history. That's never going to go away. You go back to the founding. Sometimes people just idealize them till we don't even recognize them anymore. Back in the founding, remember, we had a vice president shoot and kill the Treasury Secretary. So we have a whole lot of examples of fierce partisanship in our history. Civil War is another great example. But in past generations, most people were able to resolve their fierce differences, whether they were Whigs and Democrats or Republicans and Democrats, say after World War II, President Ford's generation, John F. Kennedy's generation, they were able to transcend the partisan bickering and differences because they held tight, they held dear to something called the vital center. The vital center was an agreement that there were certain principles, certain behaviors were absolutely essential for this democracy to work. President Ford was Exhibit A in holding to the vital center and showing that you can be both a fierce partisan, he happened to be a Republican, and someone who loves this country so much that his goal, even in his partisanship, is to keep the country together and working well. That's what we've lost, Chuck.
All right, we need to get to a quick little break. We'll come right back and we'll continue this conversation right after this.
During the 1976 bicentennial, our 38th president was prophetic. He warned that we are a great republic if we can keep it. To keep it, every generation must be reminded of the stories that we, the people, dare not forget.
The significance of that, particularly in these times in which we're having great debates about the Constitution and should the Constitution hold and should democracy hold, and there's so much partisanship in America.
It really is. President Ford uttered those words, and actually the words were originally attributed to Ben Franklin right after the Constitutional Convention of 1787. President Ford was the president of our country when America was celebrating the bicentennial, the 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. So it was a very meaningful phrase for Ford because he came into office when there was a lot of bitterness.
There was Watergate, there was Vietnam, there was a lot going on.
Oh, we forget how bad it was. I mean, people had lost faith in their government. The media really stepped up its role as not just kind of we'll turn a blind eye to character flaws. The media started really taking seriously that they had to look at the whole person who's a politician, their character, their intellect, and their political abilities.
You say it's important to tell and retell these stories of our history. What do you say to individuals who may say, that's old, let's forget about telling these things that happened 50, 100, 75 years ago. It's today that matters, and that's all that counts.
And that is something, Chuck, we face again and again. Anybody who teaches understands that this is a problem, that we have sort of a presentist viewpoint in our culture where, what's the latest fad? But you know what? We stand on principles, and those principles are ancient. They're so old, and they've done so many people so much good. Every generation has to remind itself of the principles that have gotten them this far. It's who brung us to the dance.
Final quick question. Will this be focused more on K-12 education, or do you see it going far beyond that?
We have 3 baskets of learners. So we got the K through 12 at the DeVos Learning Center, and then the Ford Leadership Forum is our site, coast-to-coast chapters, as I say, from Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., all the way to California for young professionals and college students. And then the 3rd basket is the we'll call them the lifelong learners, people who are my age and older and have some gray hair. But they had all of their history teachers in high school maybe were named Coach. Their first name was Coach. And so now they realize, I really love history and I really want to learn it well. And the Ford is a platform to do so and engage in great conversations about this amazing experiment called the United States of America.
All right, Mr. Whitney, thanks so much for joining us today on Spotlight. Thanks to the Ford family for participating in all of this, and all of the key movers and shakers over there in West Michigan who raised a boatload of money to make sure that this happens and to make sure that we preserve that very treasured museum that we have sitting in Grand Rapids. We will also make sure that we post a link on our Spotlight here for that live stream of the press conference that you did, that I think is up on YouTube. So if people want to watch the entire thing, they can see that as well. And thank you so much for joining us, and stay in touch with us. Will you do that?
Absolutely, Chuck. It was a pleasure. Anytime I can be on your show, I'd be honored.
Thank you so much. And I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the Spotlight. We hope you have a great week.